Focusing on the present moment is attention. Yeah. Now, given that no psychologist or no neuroscientist has that answer, whatever you say comes from your experience, and that's what counts. Yep, that's what counts. So, focusing on, yep. What is attention? Keep. The opposite of distraction. I like it. Foregrounding and backgrounding. Yep, that's. Unos momentos, por favor.
Start again.
A focus of consciousness?
Sorry?
A focusing of consciousness?
A focusing of consciousness, yeah. Yes. A focusing of consciousness. Okay, and say what you're saying.
Is that the same as conscious focusing? Is that the same as conscious focusing?
That's a philosopher's question.
Yeah, I think.
But that's an interesting point, isn't it?
The awareness of a quality of change or consistency.
The awareness of quality of change and consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or curiosity as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Discovery.
Mm-hmm. So the noticing of change. Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely bottom up.
We talked a lot about whether there was a difference between attention and paying attention. And I think in the end, and please correct me if I don't get it, exactly what we thought, but the point, I guess, in the end was that attention can be drawn and attention is given. When it's drawn, it's more like, a noise or a movement or something that catches your attention. It's not really something that you're deliberately doing. It's been been drawn to. You've been drawn to it. But then paying attention is more of a conscious intention to do something at a particular time.
Yep, so that would be conscious focusing.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so that's really, when you look at the psychological literature, this is, your attention gets drawn. In other words, something happens and your consciousness gets drawn to that, or you consciously decide to focus on something and your consciousness goes to that, which is what classically known as top-down conscious or drawn bottom-up. Yep, keep going. This is great.
I just got handed the box, but I don't actually have anything to say. No, I really don't have anything to say.
Other than the first question, attention, maybe within self experience, as in paying attention to the body experience versus not having the body experience. I find what is attention, if there was previous experience the body had gone through, it may have if I was asked to pay attention at that moment, before that spark of going through the first phase of attention, I may have a pre-discussion with my own self as to put imagination as the first priority to find out what could be the change or varied pathway in my awareness if I could apply what I know that I have experienced and change the behavior of my experience for the future, what then can I get to pay attention in a finer tune of manner? It's like you said, I was sitting on my bowl last night when I moved around in circle. So I couldn't figure out how to move around the bowl. This morning I said to myself, there's a figure of 8. How do I move around the bowl? Maybe I pick my one toe, and I still was not successful one time when I was told how to do. So I tried it on the spot with the preparation of paying attention of this theory, and with my bodily experience saying I can't do. So I put that on the comparison of foreground and background, and I found what I focus on, defocus, and just breathe and just understand what I should do, and I got successful. Thank you, Zoran.
So can I summarize that?
Yeah.
Attention is a complicated process. It is. Yeah, it really is complicated. Yeah, and that's why I jokingly said, you know, if you can answer that question, you'll get the Nobel Prize. Oh, nice bounce.
That's good. Yes, well, we discussed whether your attention could be broad or it necessarily needed to be narrow.
Mm.
Yeah, so we were, you know, talking about that issue of sort of multitasking. I mean, maybe in a way, Quan, what you're talking about is that you can have sort of layers of attention, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, we talked about
Nice.
yeah.
Yep. So far, if I can summarize, I've heard foreground, background, drawn and sent, given. I've heard narrow, and I've heard layered. Okay, so can you see you've already coming up with a lot of what psychology has found anyway? Yeah, so off you go.
Oh, well, you've ruined it now.
Oh, I'm sorry. But that's fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, we discussed similar sort of things about the difference between awareness and attention.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of bringing all of your senses into play, and that's and then then that's what you do to pay attention.
Mm.
Getting into the doing part of it.
Okay, so you've identified something important, and that is there's definite senses at play, and you would call those perceptual systems. So you have a visual perceptual system, you have an auditory perceptual system, tactile perceptual system, proprioceptive, perceptual, blah, 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 blah. Yeah? So you bring those perceptual systems into play. They are involved in the act of perceiving.
Yeah.
Yep.
And of focusing, having that focused attention.
Yep. And if they're involved, they can be, remember, they can be involved in two ways, at least, drawn or given. I heard you talking about something interesting. Do you want to say what you were talking about the attention? You don't have to.
I'm just trying to think about how we were discussing it. We were discussing the layers of paying attention as well, and the concept of multitasking. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's cool.
And my thought was that we don't actually multitask, and that it's broken down to microseconds of attention. So we might be, if we're driving, paying attention to the light over here, and then we're paying attention to the person crossing the road or the vehicle here. Linda then suggested that there's levels of some of the things that we're doing that are almost subconscious. They've gone into our sort of our muscle memory, such as if we were used to driving a car manually, and we're doing that, not necessarily paying too much attention to it, so it's in the background,
Yeah.
whilst we pay the micro attention to the other things. So we still didn't come up with an answer or anything.
Yeah.
It was just a
So
discussion.
you're agreeing with Khan, it's a complicated process. Yeah.
Yeah,
excellent.
and we had to.
But we also we had a discussion, and we didn't actually come up with an answer about whether or not awareness and attention are the same thing.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. That's
Interpretation, everyone might have the same interpretation for the word awareness as someone else has for attention. Each individual may have their own interpretation of the words and definition. So depending on your own perception of the word awareness or the word attention, they can mean the same thing to different people or different things to other people.
So in the psychological literature, there's that classic, the classic instance that they give. You know, you're at a party and you are engaged in the person's conversation, and then you hear your name. You weren't paying attention, yeah, but out of all that noise, you picked that sound. So, were you aware of that? Or the other classic thing, the gear shift stuff, you're looking at the road. Are you aware of gear shifting? You can be aware of gear shifting, but you might not be aware of gear shifting, especially if you're a racing car driver going at speed. It might be so in your blood that you're not aware of it. So the things that we're the most familiar with never arise in your conscious awareness, even though some part of you is attending to it. Yep. Orange box.
Oh, we pretty much had the same discussion, excuse me, with traffic or whatever, as in, and narrowed it down to your awareness is on the signs and the lights and all the cars going past and whatever, but your actual attention is going to be on, say, the brake lights in the car in front of you. So we kind of narrowed it down to those two separate words, meaning those, those two obviously different things, but your attention is going to be on one particular thing at one time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard. So this business of highly focused attention, detailed attention, it's a really rapid process. And if you take the visual system as an analogy, I mean, there's only one part of your eye that sees great amount of detail, and that's the little fovea at the back. So you actually have to flick your eye all over the place to create a detailed scene. But most of the time, you're just seeing, this much in clarity, and everything else is blurred. But you think everything else is clear, and that's a construct from rapid shifts. It happens really quickly. Huh? That's how the eye works. Yeah, it's the cards. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, please.
When we did the exercise, we also discovered that for us, takes time to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was clear, like the first one of us was doing something and we were trying to discover what it was. And then we were, yeah, that's, so made me think internally, must be the same. Otherwise why we have injuries.
Yeah.
If we put attention, why I still having a stiff neck.
Yeah.
But it takes time.
Yeah, it does. So maybe that is a little bit of an answer to that question towards awareness. Maybe the pickup, the perceptual pickup, is instantaneous, whether it's directed or captured. But maybe the time that it takes to reach perceptual awareness is what you're talking about.
This is just really a flow on from the conversations that have been happening. Because I was thinking, well, habit frees attention. And we were talking about doing things on automatic pilot. You know, that enables you then to focus on the lights that you see in front of you or a conversation while you're driving. I'm not sure if it's what you just said, Julietta, but it's also the nature of an accident is that you presume that you're going to be okay doing that, and just sometimes, you know, you're not. And it doesn't work. Okay.
Yeah. Did you want to say something? No,
Lockie,
you're right.
did you want this? No? Okay.
Okay. So what about the second one? What do you do to pay attention? So you know, notice the question is already assuming that attention is a kind of doing. Yeah, so it's a little bit of an entrapment, sorry. But that's the nature of the question. What is it that you do to pay attention?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a nice answer. I like it. Puts a smile on my face, but oh, you do Feldenkrais to pay attention?
Yes.
How did you survive till you got here?
And people do survive, don't they? They're not
They do.
necessarily aware, but survive very well. Here we go.
You know, yesterday, actually, I think it's still up on the board. I wrote, Feldenkrais believed that an infant is born into the world tabula rasa. In other words, a blank slate, socially speaking. Everything that is social, human knowledge, they're born blank slate. Well, it's interesting that we're born into the world being highly attuned to human faces, because they're like the most important thing in your world for your survival. So in a funny kind of a way, we are born into the world recognizing us being a face and what is a frown and what is a smile. So that's why it's important for us to distinguish what is a belief and what is kind of empirically true. So kind of maybe got it wrong there. Maybe there are some things that we are born into that really are already the beginnings of a social knowledge. So what is it that you do to pay attention? Hey, here comes the orange box. This way. Up there.
Big one.
Big one. Oh, nice throw. He just did it. He just showed you what it is to pay attention.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say attend to senses.
Yeah.
To attend to the senses. So in that example of a baby being born, one of the things that they attend to is smell.
Yeah.
Because they're attracted, as we did in the first segment, the sucking ATMs. They're attracted to the breast because they need the milk, and so they're attending to senses.
Mm-hmm. And how do you attend? What do you do to attend?
Focus.
How do you focus?
Good questions, you see.
What do you do to focus? You see, this is the bummer of Feldenkrais, because he wants to know what is it that you do. How do you ignore distractions? Breathing. That's the answer to everything.
Direct your perception.
Huh?
Direct your perception.
Oh, yeah, okay. How do you
shape your perception?
No, that's good. That's good. How do you direct your perception? Yeah, there's lots of hands going up. That's good. That's good. Okay, chuck it around.
I direct my perception, talking to me, gentle.
Okay. Yeah.
And trying to also thinking about what I am doing. If I want to be present, I am telling myself, I am here, I am doing this, I am doing that, I am doing my suitcase to come here, and I'm thinking, what will be the weather to put clothes and just be present.
So you're doing an internal dialogue. Okay, that's good.
Cool.
I guess I'm aware of what I receive if I'm paying. What do I get in return?
He's paying attention.
Oh, yeah. If I'm paying attention, what do I get in? What do I receive to know that this exchange has happened?
Yeah. So you must, so you must give something.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm, well, what am I paying it to? Yeah.
Now, you gesture, once again, your gesture says everything. Just like when you threw that. Yeah. All right. What do you do to pay attention?
I was just going to say a personal experience that I've noticed over time that I shared in the group that actually relates to our ATM today, in terms of in the past, how I have, well, and I still do it as a habit at times, how I've paid attention is to put lots of effort in and focus and get really tense about it and, get physical tension and think by efforting, I'll be able to attend more. But in actual fact, I've discovered over time, and obviously what we're doing here is, having that spacious kind of sense of ease and flow with paying attention. So rather than I can attend to something, pay attention using, focus, body, a whole lot of things. But then I'm tired after it because I've put too much effort in versus, so I guess I'm learning to pay attention in a different way.
Yep. Can I just amplify on that? Metaphorically speaking, So as I was watching you and as you were describing that, if let's say the object of attention is holdable, right? And you want to keep it in focus. So you hold it there. You hold it in focus. Now, the quality, you were describing the quality of the holding to keep it in focus. You can hold it like, gotcha here, come on, just stay there, go on, keep it focused right there, don't move, don't move, don't move, don't move, don't move, don't just stay there, right? You can do that. This is what the aircraft controllers, this is what they do because thousands of people's lives depend on it. They really have to be on the ball. And they burn out. They can only do one shift and then they can't do another two. So they're really burnt out. Ditto with jet pilots, anybody who has to do this. They get burnt out because most of us have learned to pay attention, the doing of attention in a very particular kind of way. And it's usually called concentrating. Now, what does the Latin word concentrate mean? It means to bring everything to a center. And you hold it there. It's the quality, and you're describing the quality of the holding. So you could say to pay attention, you need to remain attached to the object to which you're directing your attention to. Yes, there's a kind of attachment there. Or you throw out a rope and you stay attached. Yep, gotcha. Yeah. Go ahead. I have someone else's hand as well.
Give it to you. Did you?
You got my attention. Yes, what was that?
So I was just going to say the intent of what it is that you're doing draws your attention.
A little bit higher.
Sorry. So the intent of your action.
Yes.
And how it determines, in essence, how you go about doing it, which then informs your attention and awareness to it.
Yes.
Am I not talking to it again?
Yeah. So if I can, I think what I heard was that your intent your intent to act kind of already frames what you're going to be paying attention to. Is that kind of what you said? Yeah. So you can see that, once again, this link between consciousness, what you're wanting to do. Now, In the field of psychology, there's two ways to study attention. You can lock up an animal in a little cage and make it do things by offering rewards and punishments, which is a pretty vile way of doing things, but you know, for the sake of knowledge, this is what we're willing to do to some animals. Or you can go out into the field and watch them. Now, one of the most there was a particular chap by the name of Nicholas Tinbergen who got the Nobel Prize for studying animals and animal behavior in the wild. And he was one of the first people to develop this field called ethology. In other words, you go and study particular animals behaving in situ. It just so happened that Nicholas Tinbergen was also a long-time student of Matthias Alexander. He had lots of Alexander lessons. And this is what he had to say. He said, you know, Alexander studied himself in the same way that I study animals. I just pay attention to them, what they do, where they move, and is there a pattern? Now, that's a different way of studying animals. Now, when you go and look at animals, when they pay attention to things, you kind of know, because they'll go, huh? Or they'll go, huh? Or they'll go, or they'll go. You see them behaving. You will see behavior. You will. So what are they doing? They're directing their perceptual systems to the object of very intense interest, and usually it's got to do with prey or sex. One or the other. Or safety. Oh, yeah, could be, yeah. So this is an insight into what we do to pay attention. To pay attention, we have to somehow physicalize it. Your example of baby not actually being able to intentionally quite move yet, smells can kind of drift to us. And of course, if your mother's holding you, then of course you're enveloped in smell. But later on, when you come home and you go, hey husband, what's cooking? Oh, that smells good. You see, that little inclination, nose, ears, eyes. Yeah? We actually act in order to pay attention. We do something with ourselves. It's a conscious intending of a certain kind of a thing, yes? And some of our bodily systems, some of our perceptual systems are so finely controlled, I mean the eyes, that actually you don't have to move yourself very much.
Yes.
And then you start to look a bit shifty. Yeah. So some perceptual systems have evolved to such an extent that they have independent motion, and some have not. So, you know, to actually pay attention to something and, you know, try to reach out to it, we're not quite, well, you've got limbs. Now, that's why I got you. So that's why I asked you, if you couldn't say something to somebody, what would you get them, what would you do to get their attention? And you all did it. Some of you picked their hands, you took them somewhere. Some of you pointed. Some of you started off going, and you go, nope, they didn't get it. Yeah? This is how we all start off. We notice something, guess what? That thing, that index finger, indexicality, yeah? We point, which is telling you something really important about how we go about paying attention. We direct our perceptual systems. We organize ourselves to direct our perceptual systems to something in the outside world. And that becomes really complicated when you start to do ATM, because where is the focus going? Not outside, inside. So then you have to arrange, you then have to move yourself in such a way that you're not only moving to perform your intent, but you're moving yourself in order to pay attention. That is totally different from just moving.
Yeah, which is.
I didn't hear. No, I didn't.
But
I was just eating.
that's cake. That's cake.
That's a cake.
But really, Zoran, it means what?
Huh? That was a bad that was. Yeah. I didn't hear it at all. No, I was so engrossed in what I was saying. Which is not a good thing. Now, you had your, what were you?
No, it's really about, I mean, what you've just been saying, but it also is what Lockie is saying, is that really to pay attention, you actually have to have feedback. Because if feedback, because yes, because if you don't have feedback and you don't receive something, your attention, you can no longer pay attention because it's no longer interesting. So interest is the thing that you're attending to has to be interesting.
Yeah.
Otherwise you have nothing to keep paying attention to.
Yeah.
So to pay attention is a loop of that feedback, is what you're saying. But if we only think of attention as going one way, then it doesn't really make any sense because we no longer pay attention. Yeah, see, I knew you.
It's like trying to find out what is paying attention.
Yeah, tell me more.
If you try and find out right now what is paying attention.
Okay. Yeah, what is paying attention?
There's no feedback.
Oh.
You know, you're looking for something that doesn't have feedback, but it is in relation. You know, attention is in there is a relationship.
So what I think I'm hearing is you direct your perceptual systems to something. Sorry, I'm being a bit abstract. Yeah. In other words, sorry, I'll say it this way. You act in a way that your conscious attention gets focused on something. Yeah. And then you need to monitor, am I still focused? Am I still registering? Am I still registering? Yeah. Am I still registering? But that is a kind of feedback, because that question is a question about feedback. Am I registering? Is it still coming back to me? Is it still coming back to me? And if it's not, guess what? Your attention's off. Yeah, you could be, unless you're paying attention to the question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Huh? Yeah, that is the attention.
After you. Oh yes. Philippa. Yeah, it's like if you're in an ATM and you say, "Am I still breathing?" Okay, my attention is on my breathing, but I notice I'm not breathing. So, but it can be, that sort of awareness around the question of attention. So it can be specific, and it's also that global attention about where we're moving and where do we stop breathing or where do we stop doing that. But it's the interest, if our attention is on the question, and then we can shift that attention around that particular question. So yeah, so but it's always about the response. And if we don't.
Good. No. Let's. Okay. One, two, then Anna, and then I think we'll wrap it. He was out of my field of attention. That's okay. Please.
I think things like desire has a lot to do with what we pay attention to. Sort of like a kid in school hates maths, so doesn't pay attention, loves reading, so they'll read. And we do it all the time. We only pay attention to what we're drawn to emotionally.
Yes.
And it's also to do with satiation, you know, sort of something that satisfies you on some level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
Who's next?
Anna behind you, and that's it.
A really quick point about my children who I love to talk about.
Oh, good.
So but they're just really related to what. So I had a really anxious son who didn't like going to school. And the principle that we ended up working with was, and I saw a psychologist about this, even though I am one, you know, you got to see other psychologists, was just to make it really boring. The antidote to fear and anxiety is boredom. So when he was, and it really worked, when he was freaking out and like, we just sort of sat there and read the newspaper and sat in the car with him until he got bored. And so it's taking the attention away from the fear, you know.
So sometimes distraction is the answer.
Yeah.
Which is pay attention to something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really hard to be scared if you're bored. That's what I learned. So.
Pay attention to your breathing. Don't worry about it.
Go and do an ATM lesson. And then
So,
only joking.
So that's actually a really good beginning to this whole discussion, because this business of attention is central to the practice of awareness. Yeah. You are, as a teacher, inviting or intentionally directing people to notice certain things. And what you're sharing, of course, are the whats of attention. Not W-A-T-T-S, you're not sharing the power, but the what. In other words, out of your experience, and from the design of the lesson, you know that if you direct your attention to that, and then that, and then that, and then that, and look at the relationship, there's a good chance that something else will come up, rather than just letting the person move and move and move, and they're just directing their attention to what they always direct their attention to. So in a funny kind of a way, you are directing people's attention to things that they usually do not direct their attention to. And not only that, in the bigger scheme of things, layers or whatever, what you're doing is you're helping them to find a way of moving themselves that enables them to notice things in their own body. In other words, a way of moving that promotes self-directed attention. Because there's ways of moving that just obscure everything, yeah? All you notice is the big things. So really then, you're moving your whole self as a perceptual system, which is crazy. But that's exactly what we said the other day. Proprioception, it's an all-body thing. So you have to move your own body in a way that you can sense things. Otherwise, it doesn't quite work. And this is what it takes a little while to get. So when you hear Moshe Feldenkrais, or one of us, saying, don't focus on the achievement, what we're really saying is, can you move yourself in such a way that you can be attentive to your movement, rather than just doing the movement? And the two are wrapped up very intimately, and you will switch back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. You will. Okay, so that's a really good discussion, and I was really honest. There is no answer to that first question. But there is a suggestion, and this is what I do like about language, that words do have a history. And most of our English language is based in Latin or Greek. Some of it's in Sanskrit. But if you go back to the Latin root of attention, it comes back to the Latin attendere, which means the first part is ad, or towards, and the second part is to stretch. So paying attention is to stretch towards. So already in that language system, can you see that there's movement implied? So even those Italians are back there, you know, they got the movement implied. You got to stretch forth your arm, your eyes, your ears, your tongue to taste the spaghetti. Yeah, you got it. So we'll come to this next week a little bit more, because for a long time people thought that words were separate from human experience. It turns out they are so not. So that's where we'll go next week. Yeah. So to stretch towards implies that there's motion of some kind. Okay. Please have a break. We'll do an ATM lesson after the break. And thanks for that discussion. That was great.